You can take a flower, roll it up and make it fine. Sprinkle it with knowledge and a little bit of time. Cover it with headlines and a sweet euphoria too. Cannabis man, cannabis man, cannabis man. Spreading news and joy across the land. Diving deep into the growing green. Cannabis man, we're all keen.
Hello, and welcome into another episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Thank you so much for clicking on the show. I am your host, Don Kleppen. And if it's your first time here, welcome. This is a show where we're trying to take a journalistic look at all things legal cannabis. I've been a personal cannabis user of going on 20 years here. I've been using since my late teens. My friends introduced me to it back in the late 2000s after high school. And I found it really helped me with things like getting to sleep at night and staying asleep. That was something I'd always struggled with in my life. And of course, it was also very enjoyable in a social environment as well, just having it with my friends and kind of laughing a lot and adding it to the party atmosphere. That social element was great, but the medical side of it for me, and I am a medical card holder here in Illinois, that stems from things like sleep issues for me and things like anxiety and stress. And there are many other people out there who have turned to cannabis for other such quality of life issues. I've also been a broadcaster in Chicago for about 15 years now, doing news and traffic on the radio. And so as a broadcaster and a cannabis user, when weed became legal here in Illinois back in 2020, recreationally, I mean, I was very excited to start bringing the conversations I'd always had with friends of mine and other stoners at parties about their stoner journey and about what cannabis brought to their lives. I was excited for those conversations to hit the mainstream, for them to be a part of the legacy channels of media, not just here in Chicago, but elsewhere around the country. And here we are in March of 2025 when I'm recording this, and that still has not happened. Cannabis is still being pushed against in terms of stigma, the lingering stigma I talk about, a lot of the negative connotations that were first pushed as part of the propaganda of last century's reefer madness. Several different administrations here in the U.S. took part and sort of carried the prohibition of cannabis forward. And we are still dealing with those ripple effects today. So much so that legacy media channels like radio, like TV, like typical newsrooms out there, they are still too scared to touch this topic or to bring to you the kind of information that I am endeavoring to here on the show, like what new products and services are available where you live relating to cannabis. Talking with politicians, policymakers who are charged with creating or enforcing laws relating to legal cannabis, doctors, scientists who either prescribe it medically or who are in labs researching questions we have about the cannabis plant, entrepreneurs who are creating some of these goods or services, or other journalists who are covering the space like me with podcasts or who write for publications or whatever it is people are doing. The green frontier is still very much expanding. And so I became fed up with waiting for the mainstream to kind of acknowledge this. And that is what led me to creating this Cannabis Man podcast that you're listening to right now. And that was just about 3 years ago from when this episode's coming out back in 2022. And in that time, this show has reached 87 countries around the world, almost 1,700 cities, all 50 states in America. And it's been acknowledged as one of the top indie news podcasts and number one relating to cannabis, according to Good Pods. So thank you if you've been listening, if you've been a part of this journey with me from the beginning, thank you so much. And as I said, if it's your first time listening, welcome, and I appreciate you checking it out. If you would be so kind, please leave a rating or a review for this show, whichever platform you're listening on, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. However you're getting this, however my voice is reaching you right now, there is some kind of function to leave a review, to leave a rating, to leave a comment, to subscribe, Please do all of that because it continues to help me stand out from the millions of other podcasts out there, and it lets other people looking for shows to check out know that you think this one is worth it. You can also follow the show on social media, C-Man Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. It's the Cannabis Man Podcast Facebook page and YouTube channel. And if you just want to see what else I'm doing, you can hear me on WGN Radio, 720 AM, here in the Midwest or anywhere around the world at WGNradio.com. I do news on Saturday mornings. I also fill in doing other stuff like business reports, sometimes traffic throughout the week. But Saturday mornings are my consistent shift on House Smarts Radio with Lou Manfredini and then Home Sweet Home Chicago with David Hochberg. You can hear me on both of those programs, and you can also kind of hear me doing voiceover work. If you want to check out some of that work, my website is donkleppin, KLEPPIN.com. I've got some news on that front to share with you. Also going to tell you a little about something that I've been doing recently. It's taken up a lot of my time, actually. This is just something that I kind of started for the first time within the last few months, and it has really grown into something that I did not expect. And so I'll kind of explain more what I'm talking about and give you the details that I can coming up after the open here. I'm also, of course, like I try to do on this show, in addition to conversations with experts, I'm going to share some news with you in the legal cannabis space. I've got some headlines that I think you're definitely going to want to hear about if you don't know about them already. I've also got some products that I'm going to highlight for you that I've been trying this past week and really, really enjoying. You've got to stick around and hear about some of these. But my guest expert this week is somebody who started a dispensary in the New York marketplace. And I've been really looking forward to chatting with somebody from New York who's operating there, because it's obviously not just a world-class city and one of the biggest cannabis markets in the U.S. and now the world, but also New York has been dealing with some problems, some of which are typical of newly legal cannabis markets. Newly is relative. I mean, in the U.S., all of our markets are sitting here at just a decade old, 11, for some of the oldest recreational markets, which is in cosmic time, it's no time at all. It's the blink of an eye. So that's relatively still new. And New York, it's only been a few years since it's been recreationally legal there. So some of the problems that they've been experiencing, like dealing with a lingering black market, like dealing with some of the growing pains of a new cannabis market. Talking about that with somebody operating on the ground there in the Big Apple has been something I've really been looking forward to. So I'm going to speak with Vanessa Yee-Chan, who founded Alta dispensary in New York. And we're going to talk about a lot of different things relating to legal cannabis, her philosophy on it, her origin story, why her dispensary specifically is targeting women cannabis consumers, and some of the issues that she has faced in her time as a business owner there in New York in the cannabis space. So stick around, strap in, light up, get ready to go, because coming at you right now is another episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast.
This is Tommy Chong, and you're listening to the Cannabis broadcast.
Yeah. All right. Now we're into the show properly here, and I want to tell you first about some of the things that have been occupying my time over the past several weeks. I want to mention that my publication schedule has been a little bit messed up of the show lately. Since 2025 has started, my typical weekly delivery of new episodes has been thrown for a complete whirl. So I want to apologize if you've been expecting shows every week, which I normally put out on Fridays. I just want to say sorry for the delay, because a lot has kind of come up in my personal life here that's just been a little difficult to deal with and keep the regular show publication schedule loyal to what it has been in the past. I've mentioned before that I'm the only one on this team who is putting out the Cannabis Man podcast. I'm the one who books the guests. I'm the one who does the research for topics. I'm the one who comes up with segments, obviously recording this and editing it and all the social media stuff. I'm not complaining about it. It's a labor of love, but it is a labor. There is a lot of work that goes into it. And so when you're a one-man band, which I really don't recommend for anybody doing anything, it's typically not a good idea. But I decided to do this on my own, and it has just recently been a little bit hectic, and I want to tell you some of the things that have been kind of competing for my attention. One of which is that I left a broadcast job that I had, which was my full-time job. I was doing traffic for iHeart Radio here in Chicago for about 7 years until last September in 2024, and I stepped away to spend some more time with my wife, Gretchen, and my daughter, Violet. It's been wonderful. The last 6 months have been fabulous. I've really enjoyed my time spent with them, but stepping away from that full-time job has meant that I have needed to look elsewhere for money. Bills got to be paid, and so I needed to kind of fill that gap that that stepping away from my job left open, and I'm still working on that. Truth be told, it's not. I haven't been able to find something yet that has completely filled that budget gap, so to speak. But one of the things that I have been doing is, luckily for me, this journey into voiceover that I've been on for several years now has finally started to bear some fruit. My wonderful agent Brandon is sending stuff to me most days, and I have, really been auditioning hard, taking some classes, getting coached and whatnot over the past few years. And last month, I finally booked a few voiceover gigs. And so what I want to tell you is that right now, and this is perfect because I'm chatting with Vanessa, who operates in New York. So if you are in New York, if you're visiting there, if you live there, if you work there, right now, if you turn on the radio and you hear a commercial for Walmart and you hear a voice that sounds a little familiar speaking from the perspective of a new dad and celebrating Walmart's fast express delivery service, that would be yours truly. You can hear me as the voice of a new dad on a Walmart radio ad running in New York right now. In addition to that, I was very fortunate to record another commercial for Liberty Mutual Insurance, and I'm not sure yet where that is going to be airing. I'm not sure when either, but I've been very fortunate to book those two things. And in addition to the voiceover stuff, I have been getting on sets and doing some background acting work on various projects. Some of them are some independent projects, like some movies or shows that people I know are doing. But the biggest one that I was very shocked that they invited me to participate for a day on the set. It was their second day of shooting, and this is my first time sharing this news because I wasn't sure I was able to at first, but now that I've seen other people doing this, I feel like it's safe to do. I can't tell you everything about my time on the set, but I was fortunate to take part in the shooting of season 4 of The Bear. This is a show that takes place in Chicago. It's on Hulu. It has to do with a beef restaurant. Jeremy Allen White is the star. A lot of great people in the cast. And I'm not able to tell you where I was because I don't want to risk giving anything away with the plot. So I'll just tell you that I was on site. We were filming somewhere in the city of Chicago. I was there for like 10 hours that day. It was their second day shooting. Very efficient crew, very friendly cast and other background extras, and everyone I met there was just wonderful. I had a fabulous time, and I was really thankful to get a little extra money doing something that, I've always wanted to do, and just kind of being in such a great environment, seeing all these creative people working together and collaborating to make something that is ultimately going to be on Hulu and bring more entertainment to many, many people out there who love The Bear. So I was very happy to be able to take part in that, and that kind of stuff, spending 10 hours a day on these sets, taking part in these shoots, doing these voiceover gigs and stuff like that, along with just, helping out with Violet where I can, Gretchen is also building up a company of her own. She's been doing a lot of great work trying to figure that out. I'll give you more details on that when I can as well. She hasn't launched officially yet, but that day is coming very soon, and I can't wait to kind of tell you some details about it. But she's been working really hard doing that, and so I'm kind of juggling these things, my shifts at WGN Radio, these other things like voiceover, a lot of this freelance kind of acting and voice acting stuff, along with just being a stay-at-home dad. Spinning these plates and kind of doing this stuff. Believe me, I'm grateful to do it, and I'm happy that this is kind of my existence here, but I just wanted to tell you that is the kind of stuff that lately has been taking me a little bit away from the podcast, and I just need to be better about maintaining my workflow and getting back on a regular schedule. And to that end, I want to tell you that my publication day is changing. If you're listening to this right now, this episode is out March 26th, Wednesday. I'm recording this Tuesday, the 25th, and I am going to henceforth be publishing new episodes on Wednesdays. I've been putting out new episodes on Fridays for a while. It seemed like people liked that. It was just fine, but now I kind of want to experiment with some midweek releases because I've heard from people that they would prefer something that was a little bit more in the middle of the week rather than the end of it. Some of the people I know who listen to podcasts and love them, they're always looking for stuff to get them through the weekdays, not necessarily the weekends. And so to that end, I have decided to release these on Wednesdays. You can get them first and ad-free on Patreon. If you subscribe, there's a link below. Click the support the show link. It'll take you right to the page. You can become a subscriber there, and you will get a fresh ad-free episode in your inbox every Wednesday morning. And for everybody else, it'll be published on Thursday mornings, wherever you get your podcasts. So that is that order of business buttoned up. On to the next, which are some of the products that I wanted to tell you about. I have been completely inundated. And I'm very, don't get me wrong, this is not a complaint at all. This is really, I'm just so grateful that this is kind of my homework, that this is what I'm doing now, trying different cannabis products, courtesy of some of the people I've had on the show, courtesy of some people that I'm going to have on the show. Luckily for me, there are a lot of new cannabis businesses out there, companies, enterprises with products that they want to draw attention to, and a lot of them are happy to send stuff to me to try out and review for you. And so I have been making my way through some of those products, and I want to tell you about them now. One of those companies, one of those brands that I have done some work with, I actually interviewed some of the people who are involved at a high level of the company, and I'll be publishing that in the next couple of weeks. But for now, the brand I want you to focus on is a name that you've likely heard of before. That name is Tyson, as in Mike Tyson. Now, this company, he is not the only celebrity they work with. He is not the only brand under their corporate umbrella. But the Tyson brand in their company does have multiple products that they offer to people. And I'm going to be telling you about a handful of them over the next couple of weeks, including on the episode that features their interview. But the ones I want to fixate on today are their pre-rolled joints. You know that I am a big fan of pre-rolled joints because of their convenience. Nothing is easier than pulling a pre-rolled joint out of a pack or out of a little glass jar in your pocket and then just lighting it up wherever you are. That is truly some of the magic of just like legal cannabis, these mass-produced joints that you can just pull out and smoke like people did for cigarettes for so long. And I thankfully got to try 3 different varieties of their pre-rolled joints. And the names of those pre-rolled joints were Dynamite Cookies, Knockout OG, and Gelato 44. And right off the bat, I want to tell you that all 3 of these were fabulous. If you listened to my last episode, I told you about a local company called Emerald Gardens, who has a handful of brands under their umbrella, one of which is Corner Boys. Very popular brand, locally well known, and I totally understand why. But there was a launch party for the brand of Emerald Gardens back in February, that I was lucky enough to attend. I actually emceed for them at the Roots Handmade Pizza in the South Loop of Chicago, Printers Row, as some people still refer to it as. And when I left there, thankfully, I luckily enough for me, and I'm grateful to the people at Emerald Gardens for it, but they were kind enough to send me on my way with a sack full of products. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is because I tried some of those Corner Boys pre-rolls. And as much as I love the Corner Boys flower, I was not impressed with the pre-rolls. And the reason why was because I got a variety pack, and every one of their pre-rolls, after you lit it and you took a few hits off of it, they all became clogged. And then I'm messing around with the pre-roll, squeezing it between my thumb and my forefinger, trying to restore airflow so that I can finish the lit joint before it goes out and I have to relight it again. If you have, if you've taken your own stoner journey, you likely know what I'm talking about here. Few things are more frustrating than a pre-roll that you take 3 hits off of and now becomes clogged, and you just have no way of getting at the rest of that joint, which there may be like half of left. So that happened with the Corner Boys pre-rolls. And the reason that I'm bringing this up to you right now is because one of the things that impressed me the most about the Tyson pre-rolls was that none of them suffered from that problem. The airflow was clean and fluid throughout the entirety of the joint smoking experience. They're a little smaller, which I'm fine with. I've said on the show before, I'm not somebody that necessarily gravitates toward full gram or gram and a half joints. Some people like, rolling joints with a half ounce in those things. People have their different preferences. And hey, more power to you. Again, that's the beauty of this green frontier in legal cannabis. You get to have it the way you want to have it, and I get to have it the way I want to have it. I enjoy these smaller pre-rolled joints. I enjoy the half grams. I enjoy even a third of a gram sometimes. These tiny little shorties, like people call them, you can take it out of the jar, you step outside, especially when it's cold, like it has been in Chicago. Thankfully, it's springtime now, and we're starting to finally inch, above the 40s and whatnot. But, over the winter, as much as I love a pre-roll, I don't want to be outside for 15 minutes when it's negative 5 degrees outside and the wind is howling. Nobody wants that. That's not pleasant. Even if you are smoking a wonderful joint, you're trying to get back inside. And so a shorty makes your time spent outside much, much shorter and just more palatable, let's say. So I have to say the Tyson airflow in the pre-rolls I was very impressed with. No clogging. No issues that I needed to kind of suss out trying to squish it in my thumb and forefinger. None of these varieties had that issue. So right off the bat, the experience of these Tyson pre-rolls was great. Of the 3 varieties that I mentioned to you, I would say the Dynamite cookies were probably my favorite. Packed a punch. You definitely felt them. The flavor was sweet. Terpenes, sort of that caryophyllene. The Gelato 44, I felt you could taste more of that limonene, the citrusy kind of terpene. But these Dynamite cookies, those were my favorite. And the beauty of the Tyson brand is that these are available everywhere. Not just here in the U.S., but as you will hear me discuss on the interview with those gentlemen, they're now available in South Africa. So this is a global cannabis brand, this Tyson. And I'm telling you right now that you could do a lot worse than the pre-rolls that they offer. The Dynamite cookies, the Knockout OG, and the Gelato 44. I also really liked the Gelato. The Knockout wasn't bad. None of these were really bad. But the Knockout was more of an indica heavy, and I felt a little more ready for bed. After having those, I'm more of a sativa guy. I've mentioned it on the show a lot. I vibe more with cannabis that kind of is uplifting, gets your heart rate going, gets you in a position to maybe knock out some chores or do some things a little more productive. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy popping an indica gummy or something at the end of the evening after dinner and just kind of, zoning out and watching something with Gretchen or whatever. That's all fine and good. But I'm also somebody that maybe likes to ingest in the afternoon. and I still want to get things done after I've ingested that. So I do tend to gravitate towards sativas, and that's why I really enjoyed the Dynamite cookies and the Gelato 44. So if you're looking for good pre-rolls, check out these Tyson shorties that they've got. You'll see them in the what they call jab jars, and I really, really enjoy that. The branding that these Tyson guys have done, tying in their products with the Mike Tyson name and brand and all that, they've done a wonderful job, and I cannot wait to tell you about some of their other products, especially their edible products. They have such really great stuff going on there. But one other product I want to tell you about here, and I am sipping on some coffee, because as you may or may not know, if you haven't heard any of these episodes before, I love combining cannabis and coffee. Caffeine and cannabis, caffeinibus, as I sometimes will refer to it as in my house. That's one of my absolute favorite substance combos out there. So I'm sipping on some coffee right now, and I've also got a little vape pen here in my booth where I'm recording this podcast. And the cartridge is from one of the brands under the Emerald Gardens umbrella. Not Corner Boys. I talked about that vape last week or on my last episode, and if you haven't heard that one, check it out because I loved the Corner Boys design of their pocket vape. It's just such a cool shape, and it's unlike anything I've ever seen. But this one is from a different brand under the Emerald Gardens company. This is Tickled Pink, and this is a brand that is kind of focused a little more on targeting women, which I discuss at length with my guest today, Vanessa, of Alta dispensaries, and I haven't been able to try any of Vanessa's products, so that's something I do look forward to. I would love to tell you a little more about Alta's products, and I will once I have a chance to try those. But what I think is interesting is the reason I wanted to highlight this Tickled Pink vape cart is because I think Tickled Pink and Alta kind of have some overlap in terms of their target demographic, which is to say they're targeting women stoners. And I love that. I absolutely love it because, as I've known for my entire stoner's journey, my entire life as a cannabis consumer, there are just as many, if not more, women consumers of cannabis than there are men. So, as Vanessa and I talk about, this is a major demographic out there that's looking to be served in this new legal cannabis market, and I think these companies like Tickled Pink and Alta that are kind of fixated on that, I think that is really a great philosophy. And this Tickled Pink vape cart that I got is Banana Runts. That's the name of the flavor. And this is the typical 510 thread count of the cart, the 510 thread cart. So you can just screw this on to most standard vape pens. Very easy to pop in there. So that's what I did. I threw it onto my basic vape pen, charged it up, and I have been pulling on this Banana Runts vape cart from Tickled Pink for the last couple of weeks. And the thing that jumped out at me right away was the flavor. You know, you get these names for these cannabis strains, and you don't really know what you're actually going to be tasting. You know, you go and you pick up some gas station sushi over at the local dispensary. For me, maybe it's different for you, but for me, I'm not tasting yellowtail when I inhale that stuff. I'm not getting tuna on my tongue when I inhale gas station sushi. It just tastes like burning weed, like a lot of other stuff does. But let me tell you this Banana Runts from Tickled Pink, the banana is undeniable. Even smelling the cart when I pulled it out of the tube that it came in, you can smell banana. And every pull that I've taken from this thing, especially when the pen is fully charged, it is just loaded with that banana flavor. And it's not the kind of sickly sweet fake banana that some things can be, like banana-flavored chips or some sweets, some candies that often try the banana flavor. This is not like that. I really thought that they hit the Goldilocks zone here. Not too sweet, not too fake, but very potent in terms of its banana flavor. And the vibe that I get from it is really nice. It's a great afternoon vape cart where it's kind of like you're not going to get jittery from it. The energy is not too much like caffeine or something, but it's also not a heavy indica where it's going to knock you out at the end of the day. It's a nice hybrid I feel like it really occupies that middle lane of knocking you out or gripping your couch versus sending you on a twitchy caffeine, streak where you're just kind of running around and your eyes are really white with red spots and all that. It's not like that. I thought that this Banana Runts from Tickled Pink, it's exactly the kind of vape cart that I really like to have in the afternoon. We have our lunch around 3 o'clock or so. Violet goes down for her afternoon nap at that time, and I'm usually knocking out some voiceover auditions or doing whatever, writing some stuff. And I just find myself pulling on this Banana Runts vape cart, and it gets me into the zone that I want to be in, which is the edge is taken off. I have a nice little buzz, but I'm still focused. And I'm not necessarily taken out of whatever it was I was doing. I hone in on it. And then I'm there doing that task for the next hour or so. And it's just something I really like. So this is going to be a regular part of my rotation, the Tickled Pink Banana Runts vape cart. And I look forward to trying some of the other vape carts from Tickled Pink. Because, as Vanessa says during our interview, you'll hear it here soon, even though they might be targeting women, these companies aren't, turning men away at the door. And speaking as a man, these products are stellar. I really enjoyed the Tickled Pink pre-rolls that I got to try at that launch party for Emerald Gardens as well. And those pre-rolls were also superior to the Corner Boys ones that got clogged up. I really can't, not to badmouth Corner Boys because they have some good flower, and I'll tell you about some of the flower products that they have that I tried, but you can do so much better pre-roll wise. It's very frustrating, as I'm sure you can get if you're still listening to me rant about this, which I apologize for, but it's just, I'm sure you can relate to me when I say that nothing's more frustrating than hitting a pre-roll and you're halfway done and now you can't get any more out of it because the airway is blocked. That happened with every one of the Corner Boys pre-rolls that I tried. So these Tickled Pink pre-rolls didn't have that. The Tyson jab jars didn't have that, and I appreciate it when pre-rolls are well made so that I don't have to be the one to try and dig out that air hole so that I can finish the thing. And if you want to avoid all of that entirely in terms of clogged air holes and stuff like that, and even lighting up and stepping outside, get yourself one of these Banana Runts vape carts from Tickled Pink, available at dispensaries all around Illinois, courtesy of Emerald Gardens. Cheers. By the way, I still haven't had a chance to talk about this yet, but if you're using a vape, whether it's a vape pen or any kind of design of your vape cart or whatever it is, have you seen these vaping props? These are like little 3D printed puzzle pieces, and they're basically a vape stand. I just talked about the issues with pre-rolls getting clogged in their air holes. If you're somebody that rolls with a vape and you put it in your pocket or it falls on its side in your car or on your dresser or wherever else, you know that concentrate, that oil in the carts can sometimes clog up that air hole, and then you're sitting there pulling as hard as you possibly can to just get the air through it. That also can be frustrating, and that's why you should look into Vapin' Prop. VAPENPROP. And I interviewed the inventor of Vapin' Prop, and she's also been an advocate and public speaker around the cannabis space for so long. She's just a wonderful, wonderful contact. And she's done and continues to do a lot of great work for legal cannabis, but I'll talk more about this in the episode with her interview. But I just wanted to let you know, if you're looking for a solution to that problem, something to keep your vape upright so that the concentrate doesn't block the air hole, check out Vapin' Prop. Head to the website. You can see what I'm talking about. I'm not affiliated with them. They're not paying me to say this. Nothing like that. This is just a product that I've tried for myself, and I see that it solves a problem that the industry has. And these things are inexpensive. And you buy one, and you've got it to use for the remainder of your stoner's journey. They've also got other stuff like joint clips. So, again, I won't belabor the point, but I do like highlighting when I think somebody has come along and solved a problem that the rest of us are dealing with. And I feel like that's what they've done at Vape and Prop. Now it's time for this week's guest interview. And as I mentioned, my guest this week is Vanessa Yee-Chan, founder of Alta dispensary in New York. We talk about her origin story, her parents immigrating here into New York and kind of starting their journey here. We talk about the philosophy of start low and go slow for people who are maybe experimenting with cannabis for the first time. That is some advice that I've really gravitated toward, and Vanessa has kind of built that into the philosophy of her business. She also talks about why she decided to target women specifically and dealing with some of the issues in New York, like vendors getting waivers to violate what's called proximity protections. Here in Chicago, we have laws which bar multiple dispensaries from operating within 1,500 feet of each other. In New York, it's 1,000 feet. But as Vanessa talks about, they're actually offering waivers to companies who can come in and then operate within 1,000 feet of another one. So she talks about dealing with those frustrations as well as the unregulated market. There are, hemp products just like there are here in Illinois. They've got plenty of those in New York too. So she talks about the issues coming from that, the economics of different state markets and the race to the bottom of prices and possible impacts to the future of the industry, along with the issue of rescheduling. We both look at the possible benefits as well as some of the risks and negatives that she lays out, including a certain industry entering into the cannabis space upon rescheduling, which I think she has some very excellent points on. And the final topic we discuss is the issue of the lingering stigma surrounding cannabis, which, as you know, is very important to me. It's part of why I started this show. She talks specifically the stigma in certain Asian cultures. And she talks about her journey with her own family starting this business, as well as what she kind of sees from her friends who are also operating in this space, as well as the suburb of New York that she lives in. She kind of talks a little bit, sharing more of her story about her personal experience and what she sees on a day-to-day basis from people in her life in terms of those who are liberal and accepting of the new cannabis market and those who still might be conservative and kind of resist that, based on likely a few different things, but certainly some of that lingering negativity from last century's propaganda and the prohibition that we're all still dealing with today. So, I hope you enjoy this week's guest interview. Listener, welcome back. My guest today has been on a fascinating journey and is now operating a dispensary in one of the largest markets in the U.S. and quickly becoming possibly the largest market, like a lot of things up there in New York, the Big Apple. And it's been a very interesting time for them. They've launched just a few years ago, and there have been a lot of issues in the New York marketplace. I know that there have been, from people I've spoken with there, they have still been sort of wrangling with the black market like a lot of newly legal cannabis markets, and people who are setting up legitimate businesses are struggling with customers who maintain their dealers on the black market, as well as just kind of struggling with gray market products and all of that. So I've been very interested to bring on my guest today, who has a story from not just opening and operating a dispensary in this market, but is doing so with a very unique twist. She has given a spa-like experience specifically to appeal to female customers in the cannabis space. She's making her dispensary a bit like a spa, and including all the way to the checkout line being inspired by the checkout at Sephora. So she is taking sort of an idea that has proven successful in a makeup store, and she's moving it into the cannabis space. And so to talk about her philosophy, these products, and what the journey has been like opening up a cannabis dispensary in New York City is Vanessa Yee-Chan, founder and owner of Alta Dispensary. Welcome, Vanessa. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you so much for having me, Don.
My pleasure. And just so you know, listener, Vanessa was very kind to get set up for an on-camera interview, but we ran into some technical difficulties, and so she was able to quickly, adjust to this now phone interview that you're hearing her on. And I just want to give you kudos, because that sort of improv ability has got to serve you well in the business space, I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Being resourceful at any given moment is definitely, part of the skill set I think is needed sometimes in kind of this ever-changing industry and, world in general. So I think all of that is really important at this time.
Totally. And so let's talk a little about you. How did you, before we get into Alta and just operating in New York, how did you get into the cannabis space? What's your journey?
Yeah, so basically 2020 hit, pandemic. It was a troubling time. My family owns a lot of real estate, and we were looking into, and I was like, and I'm the main kind of captain of the ship at this point,
Gotcha.
in terms of managing all the properties and stuff. And, commercial retail spaces were, dying. It was really difficult to get anybody in there, a lot of tenants down payment of rent. And, this building is a very important part of my family since it was the first, my grandparents were refugees from Mozambique, Africa. So it was a small Chinese community in Mozambique, Africa, spoke speaking Portuguese, and Chinese. And they kind of immigrated here in the 70s, and this was their cornerstone building. So it was kind of to maintain the legacy of my family, I needed something to, something that was viable, something that I was passionate about, something that was, profitable, that can sustain and kind of offset some of the, rent control, rent stabilized tenants that are on a fixed income in that building. So really turned to cannabis in 2020 because I started using it as a microdoser in my late 30s, and I really found it really late in my life, but I used it more on the wellness side. So bringing those two aspects of my life together, really thinking and legalization coming about in 2021, I was like, maybe I'll really look into this as a kind of a business because I knew that anything successful in retail in New York City has to be exceptional to survive. So it really needed to be something that stood out. And I thought that being in cannabis and also maybe leading in more onto the wellness side would really make myself stand out in a very saturated industry where it's been, it's very one note in a lot of cases. So kind of making that differentiation would hopefully make me stand out. So that was back in 2020. And then since then, I started joining, I wasn't in the industry. I also own an indoor playground for kids. So I had been doing that for 12 years. And I was like, I need to, get into this industry. So I started volunteering for industry events and just showing up and just eventually joined the Cannabis Association of New York. And I started volunteering, working on policy, that would help benefit small business entrepreneurs like myself. Really kind of repealing the potency tax, working on all those little things, and eventually became the New York City chair, regional chair for the organization. And I just, between 2022 and 23, I was putting on about at least once a month an event, if not twice, on webinars and just, buyers clubs and things like that, where we just organize free events for people to attend. And it kind of built and brought the industry to me by hosting these events and finding and fundraising and getting sponsorships just to do these events for free for people to access it. I really kind of started networking and growing my contacts as well. So it was kind of a dual purpose, but I think it also helped, other, people like myself to, bring them together and to give them access to educational materials on how to start a small business in this industry in general.
Wow, that is.
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry. I just wanted to say, there's a lot there, Vanessa. That's such a cool story. I love it. I love talking with people like you who bring some aspect of their family legacy. And as you say, it was important for you, this specific building, which your family's owned for a while, it was important for you to find out something to do with this that would stand out in a market like New York. But also, I love the journey that you mentioned personally of you with cannabis, starting to use it low dose in your late 30s, finding that it gave you a positive quality of life changes. I have talked to so many people on the show like that. That was my case, back when I was like in my late teens, but getting to sleep was my main thing. And that's kind of why I still lean on it to this day. But you mentioned the low dose area. I always tell people when you're starting with this to experiment, to start low and go slow. And it seems like you've kind of built that philosophy into Alta Dispensary here. Can you tell us a little bit about the low dose experience you had starting out and what made you want to bring that into your business too?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So since I wasn't a user from my early age, I needed to start low. And I think I recommend that even today to my, customers that are coming in, just starting to that low, just to kind of find your level. It's not going to be an instant connection sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes it takes that time to build up to kind of feel your right level. Right now, I even, as a user for many years now, my journey has taken to me, maybe I'm like a 5 to 7.5 milligram kind of dosage in terms of or like a 1 to 2 hit person.
Sure.
And that's it, and that's my level, because I don't want to get wasted. I don't want to get too high. And I think that level for me makes me relax. It's kind of my glass. I don't drink, so that's my glass of wine for the day.
Sure.
And it's my time to unwind and kind of stop. I have so many things going on that it kind of makes me like not get into my head too much, but it allows me to relax. So that was my kind of journey to level up. I've also suggested to people to take a journal, and kind of document where they're starting at and what works for them, even with like minor cannabinoids. Sometimes people can take indica, sometimes people can take CBN, but sometimes they have adverse effects to that. So there's so many different parts of the plant that, it's a lot about self-exploration and what works for you at the right moment, at the right time. So there's all these different things that you can play with the plant. And I think that starting that journey, when I started, writing down those levels and be like, I didn't like that. This kind of hit me. This gave me a hangover. This got me too paranoid. This, so really writing those down and kind of documenting it helps me kind of curate exactly what's going to work for me. And I finally found my level, and I took it from there. So introducing that in theory into my store, we do stock 2.5 milligrams. Like, I know a lot of people are not going for that, but I'm constantly asking the brands can you give me like a 1 milligram, a 2 milligram, something small, and then people can level up, and really start their journey. And people do come in for that. So, right now we have 3, as far as I know, like 3 products that we have on our shelves that are edibles that are 2.5 milligrams. It's a great place to start. It doesn't make people crazy, and it's just the right level. And then they're just starting their journey. And that's really where I wanted to lean into the dispensary in general, because I wanted to introduce it to they're calling them the Canna Curious, where they're just starting their journey into cannabis at this time, as legalization is happening in more states, where it's appropriate for them to take a load. They're not going to start with a triple infused blunt. It's not that. It's like taking 3 shots of tequila versus a wine spritzer. So in the alcoholic term. So I mean, I think that so when people have had a bad experience with an edible, I think sometimes part of that. Sometimes it is part that they don't like the plant, but the other part is also because they just took too much. So I think that there is that like kind of, education that needs to come into play with that. And that's really what I'm trying to do in the space, to kind of really educate. So we have a lot of signage, a lot of information on our website. We also have dosing charts. So every exit bag has a dosing chart. So people can start with, because for me, that was the most important thing to understand about cannabis, like where to start your journey. So in terms of dosing. And so giving them that information, from the beginning when they purchase their product, they can have that and guide them as they start their journey.
Yeah, so. I love that. I mean, you said a lot of really great points there and very relatable stuff. And I think the key that I want to just dive in on is the approachability and the education side that you're highlighting with Alta, because as you said, when you compare it with alcohol, which is really, I do that all the time on the show, you kind of have to, because it's really the only like space that mainstream. People are, it's mainstream. It's what people are using regularly. And so you use these examples like, hey, when somebody's having their first alcoholic drink, it's kind of like maybe start with a light beer rather than shooting Everclear, right to your dome, because you're going to have a bad time. If you do it the other way, you're just going to have a bad time. And I think that understanding exists with alcohol, but it doesn't yet with cannabis. And I go back to the prohibition where, alcohol was legal, then it wasn't, and then it was legal again. People still had an understanding of how to behave or how how to consume it and a level that they expected to get to in terms of an altered state based on what they're consuming. We're still really getting that message about cannabis out to the general public. There are people who have been in the space who have used it since before it was legal. They know their tolerance level, but there are so many other people now that it's being legalized in states like New York and Illinois and elsewhere around this country and others around the world. People are just starting to explore a journey relating to cannabis for the first time. So I think your approach and your philosophy there is great. I love the idea of journaling because just in general, it allows you to be more reflective about, your day, a little more mindful about what you've taken in. And specifically concerning cannabis, that's a way that people can kind of inform what they like, what they dislike, and find a level that they're happy with, like you have. And by doing so, you're making it more approachable for people who, maybe they're visiting from a state or a country where it's not legal and they're having their first experience with an Alta product. You, as you've already said, you want them to have a good time. So giving them like a 50 milligram gummy that is going to send them into a different stratosphere, like we all know that that's just not going to be a great time for them. Start with something small like a 2.5 or a 1, and you can stack it. If you don't feel it, you can have 2 or 3 of those. But that's easier to do than undoing a 50 milligram or 100. You can't you can't press the ripcord and get out of that trip. Once you've started that, you're kind of just in for what the ride has for you. So I think that that's so great. And I wanted to ask, with the low dose, along with that, your Alta is specifically targeting women. And I mentioned in the open that you kind of all the way down to the way you've designed your checkout line, like Sephora and all of that. Tell us a little about why you targeted women specifically.
Well, I feel like it's a market that really hasn't been tapped into in regards to cannabis in general. But there are a lot of women users, it really. I thought that the opening the store with the women's the wellness of women in general was definitely a strategy that I was thinking of that I am leaning into. However, I found that 50% are still men coming into the store. So I don't think
Sure.
in terms of aesthetics, they don't really care. They want to get their weed. But as I'm bringing more of the, women into the market, there's also been more brands coming into the market that are targeting women. So, for example, like Eaton Botanicals, they have a Gal Pal focused on period pain. So and then we have CBD products because I also sell CBD as well. CBD focused on, perimenopause and menopausal kind of products that can help how you can integrate cannabis into your, everyday lifestyle to kind of absolve some of the symptoms of the natural, growing process and the hormonal process that we have as women, getting older.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of these aspects of the plant can help with that. And, for example, I did put up a wellness panel with the Eaton as well, to talk about how to integrate cannabis in your everyday life, for women. And so we put a whole educational panel in the store and to discuss a lot about these topics that are being, it's women in general, it's really difficult because I think women's health needs are kind of overlooked, and it's like, oh, that's just part of, life, but it's not, but we're still kind of suffering through it. And I
Sure.
feel that the plant can help with some of these symptoms. Not everybody, because it's definitely not a cure-all, and I don't want to promote it in that way, but it has helped me, and it has helped a lot of other women, resolve some of their symptoms, as they're going through, their bodies changes, whether it be just their monthly period or, perimenopause to menopause, and even sexual wellness. So all these things, I think that there are so many parts of the plant that we're learning about that really can help that. And in that way, when I created the store, I really, I made it mood-based. So when the store is categorized by moods, like sleep, chill, relief, focus, and vibe. So really ranging from the indicas all the way from hybrids to sativas. So when a customer comes in and they're asking for a sleep, well, I have everything in this one section, and then it's subdivided by how you want to consume. Because for me, when asking the customer, where do you want to take your your cannabis journey? That's for me, the most important part of introducing people to the plant. even people who are longtime users also, they also appreciate that idea, because not everyone is like, even though they've smoked it, it's not like they are really the connoisseurs,
right,
where they're higher levels, where they're like, oh, I'm going to go straight to concentrates. Those people know exactly what they're going for.
right.
But for people who are typically casual users, they're not really, they want to know what they want to use it for. There's a little bit more about that intentionality and mindfulness when consuming. So having it mood-based and effect-based really kind of guides them in the right way, almost like as a tour guide that we're showing them through this cannabis, this kind of cannabis journey, and really starting them on the right path on where they want to end up. Are they going to go to a club afterwards, or are they going to go sit on the couch and just like chill,
right,
in front of the TV? So there's different ways that you can consume, and really there's that focus. So I made it in that way so that it really kind of guides them. And I think that's how women like to shop. But I think it's working on for both men and women.
Yeah, totally. And I totally take your point there. It's not as if you guys are turning away men at the door. They're welcome. They're welcome into. I totally get that. And it sounds like a really cool approach as well. Again, a thoughtful and really approachable way that you've designed what you're doing with Alta. I think that the whole notion of, as you said, there are people who have been smoking for sometimes decades, but you start getting into the indica versus sativa versus CBN, THC, all this stuff. They don't know any more about that than somebody who hasn't smoked before, because they've just maybe picked up flower from the guy down the block who was growing it, and that's when they've been smoking it forever. So the educational side of it, what you're giving to people with this business, it's really important in the industry at large as we're expanding and as more and more people are looking to turn to cannabis for quality of life improvements as an alternative to either alcohol or prescribed opiates or whatever. I talk about this a lot on the show. Cannabis is such a great alternative to many of the substances we use to alter our states, but yet people only think of it like it has one gear, which is like, oh, you're super stoned and you're glued to the couch and you don't do anything else. What you're doing is you're letting people know, hey, there are a lot of different gears and tiers here. You can smoke this thing and you can get stuff done. You can smoke this and you might just get a little freedom from body pain. Or there's this stuff which you take at the end of the night when you're ready to go to bed, and it'll help you get over that hump instead of, just kind of maybe your mind spinning a mile a minute like a lot of us do when you're laying there at night. So I think all of that is really, really cool. And I want to ask, because Illinois had a similar issue as New York did in terms of cannabis. Multiple lawsuits really held up the issuance of dispensary licenses here. There were 2 full years when these big multi-state operators basically had a huge head start on anybody like you who was going to be starting a business from scratch or starting a small, just one location dispensary. All of those licenses got tied up in court for the 2 years. I want to ask, what was that like in New York for you? Did those lawsuits affect you at all? And then I guess as an addendum or a second part to that question is the illicit stores or the black market that I kind of alluded to at the beginning. Has that been something that you have had any issues with in operating Alta?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I was not directly affected by those lawsuits, because those lawsuits really targeted a lot of the, so they had a previous round to mine, because I'm the general application. They had this special kind of line called CARD, the Conditional Adult Use Retail Dispensary license, which targeted people who had convictions. So kind of really targeting the people who were really most affected, like on the war on drugs, especially in New York City.
Like a social equity lottery kind of a thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, but more focused on the social justice. So if they had been convicted of possession or dealing, that they were the priorities in terms of getting into the industry early on as a first, licensee.
Yeah.
However, as you said, lots of injunctions, kind of lawsuits and things like that, tied up all that. So unfortunately, some of them, they issued about 450-ish licenses, but then there was a hold for a while, so nobody can open in that round. I was on the first round, so I guess the second round of licensing for general applications, and that was almost about a year later where my application window was allowed to be open. And so it's still ongoing. Now there's a new injunction. So I am affected directly by one of them that's just recently happened. So now they're starting to issue. So in New York, there's a 1,000 foot zoning with a population of 20,000 or more. And so we are all right now 1,000 feet away from each other. However, the Office of Cannabis Management in New York has now started issuing waivers for that proximity protection of that 1,000 feet. So now people can come in during that if they can show public convenience. And who's going to be doing that? A lot of them. And unfortunately now I have an issue with Curaleaf. So Curaleaf wants to come in about 600 feet from me now.
Okay.
Violating my proximity protection. They are now announcing it to the community board, and that's how I found out about it. And I've now gone up to Albany, and I've spoken to the Cannabis Control Board twice already and made statements in there trying to get other dispensary owners who are fully supporting me to kind of counter that. So there are tons of things that the state is doing that I think is not, I think it is trying to promote maybe more dispensaries to come online. But at the same time, without a lot of guidelines, they're causing a lot of issues and lawsuits. So now, because of that, the waivers that they're issuing, now there's another lawsuit that just had dropped maybe a week ago, where some of the card people for card locations are kind of going against that waiver issuances. So they had their proximity protection already violated by other outside dispensaries, and some of them coming from backed by California brands and companies, and now they're getting violated, and they're only like 2 blocks away from each other.
Wow.
So these issuing these waivers without without any transparency, because we don't even know why they were issued. There was no transparency of information as to why they were granted these waivers. Now are violating people who haven't even opened yet, and they got their approvals and their card. So they're convicted. So they were approved back in 2022, yet they still haven't opened, and they're getting their proximity protection, violated. So these are just ongoing issues that are constantly it's a battle. It's a battle.
Yeah.
So even as I'm operational already, I already have my challenges where Curaleaf may be coming in, and they have the $2 billion, funds to outmaneuver us, outdo and undercut our pricing because they're vertically integrated with their own facilities. Yeah. And so that, so then it may just be like, it could, lead to price wars where we're, kind of race to the bottom, where we're all competing and we're trying to fight something against Curaleaf. And I can't, go as cheap as them because I'm beholden to my vendors that I work with and all the small business brands that I'm working with in New York.
Totally.
So that's a huge challenge with that.
Yeah.
As far as the illicit shops, I still have 2 on either side of me. Unfortunately, they were closing down. There was a momentum in the summertime. Yeah. But however, that's slowed down since a lot of, I think the focus has shifted with the governor's office as well as Mayor Eric Adams and his indictment as well. So a lot of the politics, I think, has muddled the whole, the search and seizure aspect from the sheriff's office. So I still have them operating on either side of it. They've been reported. They have violations, yet they're still continuing to, because there's no staffing. In terms of even the police and also the OCM, they're having issues with enforcement because of lack of staffing. I mean, they're just so overstressed, which, I understand too. It is a challenge. This is not an easy task, but, and I think they only have 150 employees. And part of that, is, 10 to 15 person unit actually doing enforcement. That's not a lot for a whole state. Right. So that's I think part of that challenge.
Yeah,
For
and,
sure.
and a city the size of New York. I'm sure that obviously adds to the whole thing, and it reminds me of some of the issues that we're facing here in Chicago too. I mean, the governor's talked about shutting down these illicit shops, and they're not illicit in terms of that they're advertising selling cannabis, but it's these hemp products. And now the governor, now the mayor are going back and forth with, do we shut these down entirely? Do we regulate them and all of this? And it's a huge mess. And I can imagine that it's the same there in New York, and the lawsuit issue as well. That you brought up a great point that I stress on the show all the time. That race to the bottom, inevitability. That we've seen that happen in states across the country right now. I bring up Colorado. I bring up Washington State. Even certain markets in California. Now, it's not to say that people aren't still doing business there, and some people are doing okay as well. I've talked to them, and they say their business is fine. But a lot of the businesses that popped up between 2014 and now have had to shut down because they could not compete with as you mentioned, with the big ones, the big MSOs that came in and were able to just charge so much less because of the way that they make the products, where they make them, as opposed to somebody like you who has deals with other product makers. You're putting their products on the shelves, and they're obviously charging you money to take those things. And there's a whole ecosystem here that I think people don't understand. A lot of consumers, all they see is the price point, and they just, here in Illinois, I'm sure it's the same in New York, where people complain about the high price point of some cannabis stuff. And I've been banging this drum ever since I started the show, which is that there is a line to walk where we want to preserve the incentive for good products on shelves. So we want to make it worth it for business owners to do, the right stuff and carry products that are high quality, like Alta's are. And but then there's the other line where it's like you want prices low enough to be competitive so the consumers don't feel like they're getting gypped. But there is a very fine line, and it's like that way in a lot of different businesses, but it's baseline economics. And when you have either large multi-state operators come into a market, or you open the floodgates and you let anybody open a storefront like 600 feet from yours, for instance, like Curaleaf, what you're doing is you're encouraging that price war where the incentive to make quality just goes away. And everybody is like gas stations where they're just trying to charge 1 cent less than the neighbor across the street to try and bring you into their store. And what happens is they're carrying crap on their shelves ultimately because they can't afford to make high quality products because they have to charge nothing for it. And that's something that I know is it's something that I myself, who wants to see legal cannabis expand and grow and get better throughout, the country and the world, that's something that I really do worry about as we move forward in this space.
Absolutely. Without that guidance and that protection from each other, from that, even just the proximity, because you have to understand too, like we are all sourcing. There's only about maybe 500 brands right now, in New York, just coming online all at the same time. And we're all sourcing from the same place. So how to differentiate from each other when all our price points are going to be the same, but then you have this Curaleaf, like kind of like a Target down the block from me, undercutting everybody in this area. They're going to have a clear advantage in general. And I think that, and people are looking at that price point. People are like, well, why are it so expensive? Especially coming from an illicit market, where the price point may be cheaper because they don't have as much overhead and taxes.
Right.
They're also going to look at what's the cheapest product out there. And so it's definitely a challenge as we're going into this new industry. So, it's a battle that I constantly am fighting, so even as being operational and trying to market, trying to do all this stuff, I still got to go up to Albany and kind of do my lobbying and make sure that, these big box retailers are not coming in and destroying an already, starting to be a saturated market.
Yeah.
And we just want to prevent that oversaturation.
Yeah, and you're doing important work, and I want to thank you for it. And obviously, as I've told you, throughout this conversation, I think the approach you're taking, the philosophy you have, not just on the products, but how these businesses and markets should be run, I think is the right one. And you mentioned politics kind of gumming up the works and getting involved in how this is all going. It speaks to a larger thing. We just, this week, week, where you and I are recording this on January 15th, this week it was announced that the DEA is pushing back rescheduling. They say 3 months, could be indefinitely based on the incoming administration. And I just, talking about how politics is kind of messing with the way that this is working, the way that it should work. I know a lot of people, including business owners, I'm sure you were as well, were looking forward to the prospect of rescheduling. The way that it's going to remove some red tape, is going to loosen some of the restrictions currently on cannabis business owners. And that vertical integration you talked about, where the MSOs who have so much money to establish in-state operations to make their products and put them on shelves cheaply and all of that, if we could get some kind of interstate marketplace where you could maybe outsource from, products from other states and get a deal with people and all of these. There's a long list of the benefits that rescheduling could have potentially given to business owners and consumers. And now we're going to have to wait a lot longer. And I guess I just want to ask you, what would rescheduling mean to you as a business owner?
I mean, I agree. There's definitely where, we could outsource it out of state. That would definitely be helpful. I think that there are some other challenges. I think that's rescheduling Schedule 3. I know, if you reschedule it, it may open the door for pharmaceutical industry to kind of exert some kind of influence over cannabis product development and pricing. So and big pharma is a huge, part of that, because it's, it would be equivalent to like a Tylenol or something like that. So because it's not Schedule 1 and to Schedule 3, the pharmaceutical, so big pharma might be coming in and kind of making, at least medical cannabis medications less affordable and less accessible, because they can control it now at that point. It's challenging, I think, because recreational cannabis would still remain illegal under Schedule 3. So that's also kind of iffy, because I think that they're talking when you reschedule it, maybe more on the medical side only.
Gotcha.
I think that it does though acknowledge kind of the cannabis's medical benefits, and where there could also be a lot more research. So that would also be on the positive side. There could be a lot more research that could be done with the accessibility of rescheduling. On the other side, and I don't know if your listeners are aware, but there's also that some of the restrictions of 280E, which is because cannabis businesses are not allowed to deduct ordinary business expenses. So on the positive side, by rescheduling it to 3, it would remove those restrictions. So we would be able to deduct ordinary business expenses on the federal level.
280E has come up on the show a lot. I know that a lot of business owners are excited about that, as well as just access to funding like typical businesses have. And then on the consumer side of things, I always talk about being able to use credit cards, or just not having to shop with cash, or using your debit card like it's an ATM somewhere and having to pay those fees on top of the taxes and the cost of the products and all that. So you bring up good points, but as you say, there is also a negative side of it, where if it was rescheduled that way, it could allow for big pharma to kind of come in and exert some influence. And I know that nobody's really looking for that, nobody that I've talked to anyway. But Vanessa, let me also ask you, I know you're a Chinese American, and there's stigma around cannabis still for everybody. I mean, it's something I talk about on the show a lot. It's the lingering propaganda from last century is still those negative connotations from reefer madness and the DARE education. Those exist just in America, but maybe even more so in specific subcultures. And so I wanted to ask you, what has it been like starting a business? You talked about how it was a family asset, the building was, but when you went into cannabis specifically, was there any pushback? Do you feel like even when you're not in Albany and you're lobbying, against politicians and whatnot, do you feel like you still need to lobby at home kind of with your family and friends?
Definitely, maybe more some of my friends in terms of the conservative. I live in Long Island, which is a suburb of New York, so it's a little bit more conservative in my area specifically. Culturally, my family is pretty liberal, so they were very very cool about it.
Nice.
outside of that, speaking to other Asian owners and of brands and things like that, it's a big stigma. Their parents don't even talk to them in some cases. They don't even recognize, even though they're like heads of a huge company, they don't recognize that they're still like, they kind of tell their friends that, oh, he's just in like pharmacy or something like that. So nothing specific. So there is a huge stigma against it. I think it's the newer generation being American born, where we're like, no, this is normal. This is fine. But definitely this kind of being immigrants and then on the being a first generation, a lot of the first generation parents, first generation kids feel it from their parents because of that huge stigma and the opioid and things like that. But actually, a fun fact, there was a hemp goddess from China, and her name was Magu, and she came from 2,000 years ago because cannabis was used for many, many years, for thousands of years, as a medicinal plant in Asian culture. But in just recent years and like the last maybe, century or so, because of the opioids and that kind of stigma, that really brought that down to a level where it was kind of lumped in all the same because it's a drug, you know, and that's it. But, traditionally in Asian, a lot of the strains all come from Asia and India. So there is a lot of history. There is a hemp goddess, a Chinese hemp goddess called Magu. And so like their history in that. It's just that in recent years, it's just been overlooked because of the damaging effects that it has had in the culture. In general.
Well, you just gave me a new favorite deity, Magu, the hemp goddess. That's
yeah, you should look it up.
I certainly will, and I look forward to finding out more about that. And I really appreciate you just taking some time and sharing with us your philosophy and kind of your experience as a business owner and somebody in the cannabis space from the New York market. I also want, you brought up something that I think is a crucial point that might be a positive note to end on here, which is that it's the younger generation. You mentioned it, not just in your culture, but in general, in America. I think that while more dispensaries like Alta are opening up and these stores which offer cannabis products to people just alongside pharmaceuticals and alongside alcohol or anything else that is totally normalized here, the continued expansion and normalization of cannabis, the kids that are growing up in this time, they're not going to know any different. To them, it is totally normal. And I think that is going to move the issue of cannabis forward in a way that nothing else really can. And so that's an exciting thing to know, that the future is looking green from where I sit. And I love
Absolutely.
that. So Vanessa Yee-Chan, owner and founder of Alta Dispensary in New York's Chinatown, thank you so much for stopping by today and just kind of sharing your perspective on this.
Thank you for having me.
And there you have it, listener. Want to thank one more time my guest, Vanessa Yee-Chan of Alta Dispensary. Great philosophy, I think, about what she is bringing, not just to the New York space, but to the legal cannabis industry at large. Targeting women, sort of designing her dispensary in such a way that other retail spaces have shown are successful. And again, the education, the legitimacy, breaking down some of the barriers that make cannabis not approachable. Just something as simple as building that start low and go slow into your business model. Some companies right now are out there in this country ratcheting up their THC percentages. They are ratcheting up the potency. Why? Because they can charge more for potency. There is a premium, if you don't know. There's a premium on high percentage THC products, which allows companies to charge more. It's part of the laws. I understand, and I've mentioned it on the show before, so forgive me if you've heard me rant about this, but something that frustrates me was that the good intentions of the legal cannabis industry, by making high THC products more expensive, the way that top shelf or heavy proof alcohol is, they probably thought that maybe it would be a discouragement to consumers to make those products more expensive. Instead, what's happened is that you have this whole group of people who are now just going to dispensaries and they are being exposed to higher potencies of THC products than maybe they ever would choose for themselves. And I won't get into it right now, but I'll say that that has led to no shortage of problems. Some of them health problems, certainly some other problems for the industry at large. So I think Vanessa's approach, making sure that she features some low potency products so that people can kind of start their journey at an approachable place that's not going to send them scrambling for the hills and the psych ward at their local hospital because they are on a trip that they had no idea they signed up for. I think what Vanessa is doing at Alta is exactly the kind of thing that more dispensaries should be doing. Make this approachable. That's how you normalize it. Focus on the first steps that people who have never tried cannabis before are going to be taking. Don't just put one wall of high THC products in your dispensary because then you're going to be able to charge premiums on everything and your bud tenders are just going to give people the highest percentage THC product they ask for. Whether you realize it or not, you're signing up for a whole host of problems if you do it that way. I think the way Vanessa's doing it at Alta is a much better philosophy. But as I said before the interview, I look forward to trying some of her products whenever I can. If I can get to New York sometime soon, I definitely want to see what she's got going on there. But for now, I would like to share with you some news headlines that I think you definitely want to hear about. First one, we're going to stay in the Northeast with New York. The governor signed a bill just a few days ago to expand the state's marijuana farmers market program with pop-up events. This is an article from marijuanamoment.net. Kyle Yeager is the author. I have copied this link below, which I typically do with news articles that I share here. And this has to do with the New York State. Governor Kathy Hochul signed a pair of companion bills into law that build on the state's marijuana farmers market program, which allow for expanded partnerships between licensed cannabis businesses and stand-alone pop-up events. The final approval from the governor coming from the bills submitted by Senator Michelle Hainchey, a Democrat, and Assemblymember Donna Lupardo, a Democrat, last Thursday, March 21st. New York initially authorized cannabis farmers market events in 2023, aiming to expedite consumers' access as traditional retailers were being approved and help producers bring their products directly to market. Last December, Hochul separately signed legislation to revive the program after it sunsetted in January of 2024. These newly enacted measures will expand the law. Kyle says, for example, they amend statute by making it so licensed retailers would need to partner with a minimum of one cultivator and one processor for the showcase events, whereas previously the law indicated they were limited to only one partnership for each of those licensing categories. Showcase permittees will now also be mandated to sell products cultivated or processed by those partnering licensees at the events, though the bills make clear they could also sell other products. These bills take effect 120 days after enactment. I have linked that below, as I mentioned before. That's all I'm going to read, but by all means, check it out for yourself. There's always a lot of great information. The reporting at Marijuana Moment is second to none. I think they do such a great job of tracking the developments in this legal cannabis space. It's why I always try and highlight their work on this Cannabis Man podcast. Heading down south now, Texas, the Senate, south end of the country here in the Lone Star State, has passed a ban on the sale of consumable THC, among several other priority bills. This article is from kvue.com, published March 19th, so 6 days ago from when I'm recording this, by Daniel Peralt. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said he wants to ban all consumable THC in Texas with Senate Bill 3. So the Senate passed this bill last week, Wednesday, banning the sale of all consumable hemp products with THC. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has said banning all consumable THC in Texas is one of his top priorities. A quote from the governor here, "This is a poison in our public. As the legislature, as our number one responsibility is life and death issues, that's why this is Senate Bill 3, end quote. The product started popping up after Texas approved a farming bill in 2019. House Bill 1325 established the Texas Health and Safety Code, Chapter 443. This allows for the commerce of consumable hemp products across the state that do not exceed the 0.3% Delta-9 THC. This is the limitation set by the federal farm bill back in 2018, which is still the farm bill of today. They have extended it, now going on for I guess this is the 7th year. That law has led to the sale of hemp-derived Delta-8 THC and products that contain Delta-9 under that 0.3% threshold of the total weight, which can still be, as they note, an intoxicating amount at a high ratio. So this has to do with these hemp products versus cannabis, something that Vanessa and I talked about as well, and that I have mentioned a lot on this show, as it is currently a big issue here in Illinois. They still, the Springfield, the lawmakers in this state have still not figured out which way they're going to go on this. If it's going to be a full ban or if it's going to be regulation of the hemp products the way they do with cannabis products. But either way, I have linked that article below as well. You can get a lot more context and information on what's going on in Texas. Expanding federally now, and this is another Marijuana Moment article, federal marijuana trafficking cases continue to decline as state-level legalization expands, a new government report shows. This was published just yesterday, March 24th, from when I'm recording this, written by Ben Adlin, and the federal marijuana drug trafficking cases continue to fall steadily in the era of state-level legalization. This is from a new report out of the U.S. Sentencing Commission, USSC. The recently published source book of federal sentencing stats revealed the continuation of a trend that's been seen over the past decade, with cannabis-related prosecutions dropping precipitously amid the state-level reform push and shifting federal enforcement policies. In 2024, there were roughly 500 federal cannabis trafficking cases, according to the report. That is down from nearly 3,500 in 2015 and approximately 5,000 in 2013. So in the past decade, these federal cannabis trafficking cases have shrunk by a factor of 10. That is significant. And it makes sense. I mean, again, federally it's still prohibited, but if it's legal in the state where the person has it, how are you going to charge them with trafficking? This to me really just seems like it's keeping up with the trend of expanding legalization and access. But it's still nice to see that reflected in a federal government report. So again, like all the other Marijuana Moment articles, a lot of great context and information there. That's all I'm going to read, but I've linked it below for you to check out for yourself. And the final article I want to share with you today, this piece of news is from Cannabis.net, a blog that I go to from time to time. It was a topic that I thought might be interesting to you. Cannabis tourism in the U.S., the top destinations for cannabis enthusiasts and fans. Wherever you might find yourself on the cannenthusiast scale, if you're, somebody who's never tried it, if you're a canna virgin, I suppose, or if you are well-versed in the green leaf. Here are the hot spots in the U.S. to try new strains and advanced edibles along with THC drinks. Posted by Laurel Leaf, Monday, March 24th, yesterday from when I'm recording this. Number 1, Denver, Colorado. Not surprising, Denver long considered the epicenter of cannabis culture in the U.S., given that Colorado was the first state back in 2014 to go recreationally legal. If you haven't heard my discussion with Tim Cullen of Colorado Harvest Company, which was out last week, we talk about the very beginning from medical cannabis in Colorado all the way to today, and he has some very interesting perspective on that. Number 2, and I love to see this recognition here, Chicago, Illinois. Chicago, if you like to say it like that. Sort of like a Bill Curtis style. Very much news anchory. Kind of really hit that in Chicago. Illinois, with its progressive cannabis laws and vibrant urban culture, has become a key destination for cannabis tourism in the Midwest. Since legalizing recreational cannabis in 2020, the state has developed a thriving industry that attracts both locals and visitors. Laurel Leaf talks about Chicago's cannabis scene, as well as the cultural attractions and cannabis-friendly events. Illinois does host many more of those throughout the year than they did a few years ago, and I love to see the expansion of that. Number 3, Los Angeles, California. Gotta have California on this list. Of course you do. Number 4, Seattle, Washington. Number 5, Portland, Oregon. 6, Las Vegas, Nevada. And then the conclusion, and you can read on. But those 6 spots are listed by Cannabis.net as the top tourism destinations for people interested or curious about cannabis. What do you think about that? Have you been to any or maybe all of those cities? Denver, Chicago, LA, Seattle, Portland, or Vegas? What was your opinion of the cannabis scene there? Do you think Denver's number 1? Do you think that fits? Should Chicago be number 6? What's your opinion of cannabis tourism in the United States? Let me know. Scroll on down, hit the Text Cannabis Man link in those description notes, and tell me your thoughts. Are you somebody who would be a cannabis tourist? I thought the idea is great, and I would love to check out some of the vibes in these other cities. But at the same time, I've heard people bring up the fact that because cannabis is expanding so rapidly, what's the point in being a tourist when, if you wait long enough, it's likely to pop up in your hometown? So I do get that point of view as well. But let me know what you think. Send a text. And now, as I like to do after the news segment of the Cannabis Man podcast, I like to end these episodes on a bit of a higher note, pun intended, if you will. I like to try, and sometimes the news is depressing. I would say not too much there in that roundup of headlines, unless you live in Texas. That THC ban definitely sucks. But aside from that, not too bad. But even so, news can be depressing, and so I started to try and think of ways that I could end these episodes on a more uplifting note after rifling through those news headlines. And I came up with the haiku, a poem in the Japanese style, which fixates on present tense and certain syllable counts of the various lines. A 3-line poem, 5 syllables in the first line, 7 in the second, and 5 in the third line again. And so, as I often like to do, let me encourage you to grab some cannabis product near you. If you got a THC drink, crack it open. If you got a pre-roll, light it up. If you got a dab rig, heat up your blowtorch. If you got an edible, crack open the packaging and bite into that gummy or chocolate or whatever it is you got. And let's enjoy this week's haiku, read, as always, by my friend Reg Kiefer. Take it away, Reg.
Spring haze lifts the veil. New paths bloom like green tendrils. Change wafts on warm winds. Whoa. That right there was this week's haiku, themed on spring and new opportunities, I'm guessing, eh, Don?
Right you are, Reg, and thanks for reading that as always, and thank you, listener, for sticking around and checking out this episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. I hope that was informative for you. Let me know what you thought about that article in terms of tourism or any of the other news headlines that I shared. Also, let me know if you're in New York, if you've tried Alta Dispensary, if maybe you've met Vanessa, or you hear my Walmart ad on the radio. Let me know. I'd love to hear any and all of that. You can text the show at the Text Cannabis Man link in the description notes. You can reach out on social media, send an email to host@cannabismanpodcast.com, reach me on my website, donkleppin.com. Any of that is all fine. I will get your message however you choose to send it. Be sure to leave a rating or review for the show on whichever platform you check this out on. If you thought the information that I brought you today had some value, if you were entertained at all by this, I hope you were, but if not, either way, let me know. Just want to hear from you. Engaging with the show, telling me what you liked, what you disliked, all of that is helpful for me as I continue forward with my efforts to create a better Cannabis Man podcast. Have a great rest of your week. Be sure to spend time with those you love and avail yourself of some lovely and hopefully legal cannabis. And we'll talk next week. Bye-bye. Cannabis Man is 100% originally crafted by myself, Don Kleppen. Original theme music written and composed by Yusu Kim, aka Good Son.